So in this video I'm going to go over some of the steps that I took to try to diagnose a P0136 code, which is a circuit malfunction code for the second oxygen sensor of bank 1. And basically I was wondering what was meant by the so-called circuit malfunction. So I basically wanted to see what kind of signal the malfunctioning oxygen sensor would be generating. To do this, I decided to use a software called FORScan in order to analyze the signals being generated by the O2 sensors. And in this video, I'm going to show how I downloaded, installed, and used FORScan to try to analyze this issue. And just as an FYI, this FORScan software only works for Ford, Lincoln, Mercury, and some Mazda vehicles. So the first thing that you're going to need if you want to use FORScan is something like one of these adapters, which is an ELM327 OBD2 adapter, and it basically interfaces between the car and the computer. So the one that I have is an OBD2 to a USB adapter, and it's kind of an older model that has a mechanical switch on it. Though the FORScan website has links to more updated models. So what I'm doing here is I'm navigating to the FORScan website, and once you get to the FORScan website, you have to click on the Products tab and click the link for the version that you wish to download, which is based on the operating system that you're running. In my case, I'm running Windows 10 on this laptop, so I download the Windows version. So I click the link for Windows FORScan, and it starts, it doesn't show any prompt, it starts to download automatically once you click that link. Once it's downloaded, I go to the folder where it's downloaded and I click on that executable file, and I just follow through all the prompts as shown here in the video. So as I go through all these prompts, I just basically select all the default settings. I don't change the directory names or anything like that. So I just install it with the default settings. So once I have this FORScan installed on the laptop, I plug that OBD2 adapter into the car, and then the USB end of that adapter into the laptop. And I go into the laptop and I start the FORScan software. And I'm not necessarily doing all this in the right order or anything, so I recommend you guys just confirm with the instructions and stuff online. But in this case, I ended up starting the engine to the car before I connected the FORScan. So I think the instructions say that you have to put the vehicle into key on, engine off for connecting to FORScan, but in this case I did it with the engine on. So with the engine running, I go into FORScan and I connect it to the vehicle by clicking the button in the lower left hand corner there. And this initiates the connection process to the vehicle through that OBD2 adapter. And like I said, they recommend doing this with key on, engine off, but in my case the engine is already running. And one more thing to note is that the first time you connect FORScan to the vehicle, it seems like it takes a little bit longer than the subsequent times, because it seems like it has to install the drivers for that adapter. So I'm not sure if you have to still be connected to the internet for this driver to be installed, or if that driver is like some kind of generic driver, or if it's something that's downloaded off of the adapter itself. So like once the FORScan is successfully connected, I click on that oscilloscope button on the left hand menu, and once clicked, that option shows a screen with many of these individual squares. Each of these squares can be configured to show the signal outputs from various sensors of the car, and as I understand, each of these outputs are referred to as PIDs. Now to add the PIDs, you can either like click on one of the boxes, or you can click that gear icon on the bottom of the screen there. And so I double click one of the boxes, and to add the options, I filter the PIDs by entering O2 into that filtered text box. And this way only the O2 related PIDs are shown in the list on the left hand side. So basically I select the outputs of all the 4 O2 sensors, and I also decided to add these HTR PIDs, these fault code PIDs. I wasn't really sure what these particular PIDs were about, but I decided to add them anyway to see if they had any useful output. So once you've selected all the PIDs you want to display, you click that checkbox at the bottom of this dialog screen, and it should now show all of the various PIDs that you selected here. But at this point it's not going to show any output yet. In order to show the output, you have to press that play button on the bottom left hand corner of the screen, and that initiates like this the reading process of the various signals coming from the car's computer. And after a while it becomes quite clear that the output of that O2 S12 sensor, aka second oxygen sensor of bank 1, the output does not match the output of the other sensors, and it's basically too low. The output of that sensor is only going to about 0.01 volts, whereas the functioning sensors seem to go up to about 0.9 volts. So it seems that the output of that oxygen sensor is really not correct. So something is going on with that oxygen sensor's output. Though one thing like I want to add at this point is that I think despite having this information of like the voltage not being correct on this output of this O2 sensor, I think I can't really conclude that the issue really is with the O2 sensor. So like I don't know if like another situation, like perhaps a shorted out wire could cause the same kind of condition maybe, but again at this point I decided that I'm just going to change out that O2 sensor anyway, and hope that it resolves the issue. But like I said, despite having this output, I don't think I have enough information to confirm that the issue is with the O2 sensor itself, or maybe something else along the wiring or something like that. So at this point I began the process of replacing the sensor itself, and I'm not going to go into all of the details of replacing this particular sensor, but one issue that I ran into, which other people might have as well, is that the harness or the pigtail that comes with the new O2 sensor, it's a bit longer than the harness that came with the original O2 sensor. And basically it seems like the aftermarket companies like Motorcraft and NTK, they have basically like one downstream sensor, like that sensor itself that screws into the exhaust. It's interchangeable between different Ford models over like 20 to 25 years. So I guess they don't want to stock different oxygen sensors for every specific model, just because the harness is a little bit of a different length. So they have just one general oxygen sensor part number with an extra long harness that will work on, I guess, most of their vehicles. So in this case, you got to kind of shorten the effective length of that harness. I think the correct way, as I understand, is to use some zip ties and just to fold the wire and to shorten that effective length. Some oxygen sensors come with those instructions, but the oxygen sensor that I got didn't come with those instructions, because I didn't get the right one for this particular model of car. But it will still work. And again, this is kind of sloppy, but I was kind of in a hurry at this point because it started to get dark, and I wanted to confirm that this new O2 sensor was going to resolve this issue. But again, going back to the issue of slack in the wiring, you know, if there is too much slack, it could potentially rub into a hot exhaust or rotating components like the crank pulley dampener or the CV output shaft here. This particular O2 sensor, the connector is like between those two rotating components, right? The CV output shaft and the crank dampener. So that's just something to take note of. And the way I did it here is sloppy, but I'll probably do this. I will redo this at a later date. So after I installed the new O2 sensor, I plug the OBD2 adapter back into the car, and I put the car into key on, engine off. So I go back into the laptop computer and I start FORScan again and initiate the connection process. Once it's connected, I go back into that oscilloscope option, and in this case I press that play button in the lower left hand corner again to start like reading the values. And as you can see, the RPM is 0 here because I didn't start the engine yet. So once I start the engine, the RPMs jump, and I start to wait to see how the new O2 sensor responds. And as you can see here, since everything was cold, all the sensors and like the catalytic converters, they're cold and they're not really generating any output. So I'm going to speed up this part of the video a bit. But eventually that new O2 sensor did start to generate proper output. And as you can see here, that output starts to rise after about maybe 2 or 3 minutes. And technically at this point, I think this confirms that this new oxygen sensor resolved the issue. But after this, I did do some more interesting tests with FORScan. I added the speed PID and the throttle position PID, and I started a new scanning process, and I closed the laptop lid, and I took the car for about a 15-minute drive. So what you're seeing here is about 15 minutes worth of driving here on the oscilloscope. This is, again, I sped this up. So yeah, so after about 15 minutes, I thought it was interesting to see all those outputs from the O2 sensors. But honestly, I can't tell like if these outputs indicate a proper functioning catalytic system, or if they maybe imply that there may be some issues with the catalytic system. What I found is that you could do some other tests in FORScan. Like if you click on the clipboard option in the left-hand menu, you can see that there's some tests here that you can run. And in this case, I just ran the first test I ran was the PCM key on, engine on test. This particular test took quite a while to run, so again I'm speeding this up. And after that test, I also ran the mode 6 OBD2 test, and I found that the output from this particular test was quite interesting. In particular, I think the output which is related to this test is the that switch ratio, like those two switch ratio parameters there. I think this shows how well the catalytic converter system is functioning. So bank 1 has a value of 0.28 and bank 2 has a value of 0.61. And from what I could tell here, it seems like as long as they're below 0.78, they will be considered okay. But it seems like there's quite a big of a difference between bank 1 and bank 2. So I'm under the impression that bank 2 is kind of a less healthy. It's not functioning as well as bank 1. So like maybe replacing the downstream sensor on bank 2 will improve the switch ratio for that bank as well. But that's something that I might do in a later date, because from what I've read is that sometimes old oxygen sensors could make the computer read output that makes it think that the catalytic system, like that the catalytic converter is faulty, whereas it might actually just be the O2 sensors themselves. So overall, I think that's the nice thing about using this kind of software, this FORScan software, is that I was able to get the confirmation that the new O2 sensor is generating a proper signal and that it resolved the issue. I didn't have to take the car on, multiple drive cycles and wait for the check engine light to turn off or anything like that. And it was also nice to see that mode 6 test, which kind of shows the health of the catalytic converter system. And overall, I was initially kind of intimidated about using the software. I did have it installed on an older laptop, and I may have plugged it in a few times out of curiosity a few years ago, but this was the first time that I put it to like a legitimate use. And it turned out that the installation and the usage was pretty simple. Um, I know that there are like some advanced scan tools out there that can do similar things, but and they've become cheaper over the years. But I kind of like being able to use a laptop for this kind of purpose and not needing an entirely different device. Although this is FORScan, and again, as I mentioned earlier in the video, it only works on Ford, Lincoln, Mercury, and like Mazda vehicles. And I should also mention that this is not official Ford software. This is like some kind of third-party software, but it's well known and it's quite nice to use. So. And before I end this video, I'm also going to do a torch test of the old oxygen sensor. What I'm doing here is measuring the continuity of the sensor, and there does seem to be some continuity on the more sensitive ranges of the ohm meter. So after I do that, I start the actual torch test, and there are more like in-depth videos online about how to do this. But I basically connected the gray and black wire to the voltmeter, because generally speaking, the white wires are for the heater element and the black and gray wires carry the signal. But it is possible that I got the polarity mixed up of those signal wires, so that I think it would not really cause a big issue, because I think we would still be able to see whether or not the sensor is generating a proper amplitude of signal, whether it's negative or positive. I think it would still show the correct amplitude or magnitude of that signal. So initially during the torch test, it seemed like the sensor was not generating any signal at all. But once I got it very hot, probably too hot, it seems like it started to generate a slight output. Though technically it's still too low of an output. It only went up to about 0.1 volts. So, or negative 0.1 volts, because I may have had the polarity crossed, but regardless, 0.1 is too low. It should be closer to 0.9 volts at the high end. So it really seems like the O2 sensor had some sort of internal issue. And just as some background in regards to when I started having this P0136 code, it started when I dropped the Y pipe to do some repairs on the Y pipe, and I like removed the O2 sensors from the Y pipe, and it took quite a bit of force. So I'm thinking that during the process of removing the O2 sensors, I probably damaged them internally somehow. So and I think that this test kind of shows that, yeah, there is something wrong internally with the sensor. So thank you for watching.